Okay, so hello everyone and welcome to Graduate Mentors Workshop, Raising Your Profile to Further Your Career with Sophie Milliken. So thank you all for responding to the invite. It's really great to see everyone here and ready to learn from Sophie. So I will introduce you in a moment, Sophie, but I'll just introduce Graduate Mentor shortly first. We tend to host webinars like this once a month to give graduates, students and mentees extra guidance and advice as they make the transition out of university. So I am Karima Kiat and I'm the marketing manager for Graduate Mentor. So this was founded by Dan Hawes in August 2020. So the idea of this was to allow students and graduates to have free one-to-one mentoring sessions to help them reach their career potential with expert support. So I'm also the marketing manager for Graduate Recruitment Bureau, which is the go-to platform for university students, recent grads, alumni, and recruiters. And we actually have around over 75 staff now and over 2,000 clients across all different sectors. So clients can include people from Amazon, IBM, Unilever, Ocado, and several other SMEs as well. And our recruitment experts have successfully matched thousands of graduates with either graduate or executive level jobs as well. And so since launching Graduate Mentor around 4 years ago, we have now a community of over 1,000 students and graduates on the platform, and they represent a spectrum of backgrounds, so within universities, courses, and with a lot of them representing diverse and underrepresented groups. So this is the main audience that we're trying to help get on the career ladder. And now this also shows where the main bulk of our mentees come from in terms of university and ethnic background. So there's a nice diverse range there. So we have actually achieved a lot over the last 4 years as well. And as I've said, we've hit over 1,000 mentees on our platform. We have just over 150 active mentors as well who have joined us. And we've hosted workshops like this one, which are all recorded and on our website as well for you to have a look back on after this. So we have a large social following as well. So we reach around 1 million accounts each month. And 26 success stories from our mentees that have either had great outcomes from their interviews, landed a job, or just in general gained confidence in their job search. So we also have hosted skills webinars directly with 7 different universities, and we have some really great partners supporting us as well to help us cover the costs to allow us to maintain Graduate Mentor in the future. So I'd like to thank GRB, SureServe Group, Softwire, and Oakwood. Excuse me. So a little bit about Sophie as well. Not only is she a multi-award-winning businesswoman that has co-founded and supported women-led communities, but she is the founder and CEO of Moja Group, which is a company that works with entrepreneurs and senior executives to bring their profiles to life to become authorities within their industry. So it'll be really insightful to hear from her today and to learn how to elevate your brand and excel in the corporate world. And so just to note, while Sophie is speaking, please can you make sure to keep yourself on mute, but you can type any questions throughout in the chat to cover us, so that we'll cover at the end as well. So like I said, this webinar is being recorded too, so you can go back to this in the future if you. So on that note, Sophie, would you like to take over and you can share your screen?
Sure, thank you for that lovely introduction. So I'm sharing my screen, I think, hopefully. Can you see it?
Yes.
You can? Awesome. So, can you still see it? Can you see my intro screen?
I can't see it from my end. Let me just see it. No.
Okay, so let me just try again. Because what I couldn't see was anything else other than my screen, which wasn't great. So let me just
That's all right. It does happen. If you're on the one screen, it will take off the Teams and bring up
I
the...
don't. Have you got my slides? Would you be able to flick through
Yeah,
them for me?
of
Right.
course.
Let's do that, and then because we can already tell that I'm technically challenged. All right. So let's keep it simple. Let's keep it simple.
Let me just grab those slides for you.
Thank you. So we are going to be talking about all things profile raising. Karima did a amazing intro for me there. I am very familiar with the world of graduate recruitment as well, because actually my first business was a graduate recruitment and employability consultancy. So my background was that I was head of graduate recruitment at John Lewis for quite a while, and then left to set up that first business, and then worked with all sorts of really big graduate employers to design their assessment processes and materials, and also worked with a lot of universities throughout the UK to prepare their students to get graduate jobs. So we used to do lots of mock assessment centres in large football stadiums up and down the UK. So I completely understand all things graduate recruitment. My knowledge is probably a little bit rusty, having left the industry a few years ago, but I totally get it, and will understand some of the challenges that you might have. So bear that in mind when you've got any questions, because I'll be able to think with that hat on as well. So the session that we're going to be doing today is fast-paced. I've got loads of stuff to cover with you, some really good stuff. I've got an exercise in here, which you would probably need a notepad for, or you can use the notes app on your phone if you've got that handy. If we've got time, we're going to do that. If we haven't got time, I'm going to tell you how to do it, and you can do it if you choose to following the session. So if you just want to click on to the next slide, it's going to be very COVID-esque with next slide, please. So this is me. Oh, go back one. Yep. So this is me. No worries. So obviously this is me looking a bit more glamorous than I do today. I've been working at home this morning and coming to the office this afternoon, so I'm kind of in my scruffs today, but I can be glamorous when I need to be, hence the picture. So you'll see on the slide there a few different ways to contact me. So I'd be missing an opportunity if I didn't invite you to connect with me on one of the platforms on the screen, and we're going to be talking about some of these platforms in the session as well today. So my biggest platform is LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn. I usually post there a couple of times a week. I comment on LinkedIn daily and get loads of value from that. Now, depending on where you're at with your job search or your careers, you probably, I'm going to guess, have some kind of presence on LinkedIn, but you might be a bit of a lurker and you might not really do very much on it, not really know how to use it because it's a supposedly professional platform. But I'm going to encourage you throughout the session today to definitely get onto LinkedIn and do it a bit more, even if it's just a case of following companies that you want to work for, or maybe seeking out a few of the hiring managers within those companies. But we will touch on LinkedIn a bit later. I'm also pretty visible on Twitter, or X as it's now called, and also on Instagram as well. So if we're not already connected, which we're probably not, then I would love to be connected with you. Okay, so next one. So this is what we're going to be covering in the session today. Like I said, there's quite a lot of stuff here. So we're looking about how you're going to build your brand or your identity as you're starting out on your career. We're going to touch on invisible PR and what that means. Look into defining your brand, so what it is that you stand for, and then following on from that, we're going to touch on networking and then also social media in a professional environment. So next slide, we'll start with, and then the next one again, we're going to start with this building your identity as you start your career. So I think it's always a bit weird, isn't it, when you're kind of starting out and you've gone from, particularly for your generation, where you will be familiar with all sorts of different social media platforms, for example, but perhaps haven't had the experience of using them in that professional context yet. So when you're thinking about building your identity and what you stand for, you might kind of almost feel a bit Jekyll and Hyde around what you stand for in your personal life or with your friends, with your family, versus what you want to stand for in your professional life. And I think when you're starting out on your careers, hopefully you've had some kind of sort of part-time work or holiday work when you've been studying. But there is a big transition between going from that, which is probably, although I'm sure you'll have taken it seriously, going into a career that hopefully is something that you're going to progress within. And you might just want to think about how you make that transition and how you present yourself differently. So really important to be able to define and communicate what makes you you, so your unique value proposition, and think about how you're going to be developing your professional image in the workplace and how you want others to perceive you, because that is going to have an impact on how quickly you progress progress in your career. And I'm sure most people will want to progress reasonably quickly and sort of progress through the ranks. So we'll just pop on to the next one. So I think it's useful to just think about when you're going into the workplace, how your performance is going to be measured. So just a few really quick top tips on this one before we delve into the stuff more about you and what you stand for. So really important when you're starting out in your graduate career to be super clear around what's expected of you. So again, if you've had previous part-time work experience, if you've worked for a big company, you might be familiar with performance reviews or appraisals or performance-related pay or how you're assessed. It might be that you worked for an organization that had values and things like that. When you move into a graduate career, even if it's for a very small business, you need to be super clear on what is expected of you within the role. So if you're applying for a graduate scheme, you've probably seen a bit of information in the recruitment process. If it's a job, an entry-level job, you will have probably a job description, or you might have a combination of the both. So really important when you're starting in your role to build that relationship with your manager. So understanding those expectations. There might be some company expectations, and then there might be some expectations that your line manager is going to have of you in particular. Really great idea to be setting some goals. So you might have them set for you if you work for a large organization, or you might have an opportunity to contribute to them. And if you're working for maybe a really small business or a startup that actually hasn't got these kind of things in place, actually in some ways that's an amazing opportunity, because you can be really forward thinking and be really kind of on the front foot by suggesting goals that might work for you within that role and for that business. And then it's just thinking about the longer term career planning there as well. So I don't know if we can email people afterwards, but I can make a couple of resources available for everyone. Awesome, we can. So I've got a really cool personal development plan template that you can have, which we'll send out to you. And this is going to help you in terms of a resource that you might want to use within your first role if it's not available within the organization. So this is going to help you to set goals, to keep on track of your progress, and will be super useful. Other things that would be useful are just thinking about recording your accomplishments as you go through the job, because if you start a graduate scheme in September and maybe you don't have a performance review for a whole year, then it's making sure that you're recording real wins as you go through the program, so that when it gets to the following September, you're not having to remember all the cool things that you've done. So really good just to keep on top of that, particularly when things are new. So I've got a career development plan as well, which I will also share with you. Okay, let's move on to the next one. So with this one, I'm actually just going to play a short video clip. I'm sure you guys will all know this guy. Okay, so we're just going to play this short video clip, and then it will make sense in a minute. I can't hear the sound.
Not sure how.
You maybe just need to do the sound along the bottom. If not, you can.
We got the captions on that.
Yeah, it has got captions up.
Yeah, I think there might be an issue with sharing the audio from the PC.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let me give the voiceover rather than share, rather than look at, because it's quite a long clip to just watch the notes for. So I don't know whether anyone's ever seen this clip. Obviously, Stephen Bartlett, super well known now. He's got an amazing brand. We could probably think of some words that we would use to describe him and what he stands for. And in this clip, he's talking about invisible PR. And what that means is, what do people say about you when you're not in the room? So thinking about that in a work context, you want to become known for something quite quickly in your job when other people are talking about you. So if there's a project or something, or a promotion or something to get involved in your new workplace, you want those managers to be saying, whoever, your name is the person that we need to get involved in this. You want to always be on people's radars. And so there's a fine balance to be had, isn't there, between being a bit too over the top and being silent. And you'll see that if you've been to an assessment centre, because there's always both of those extremes in an assessment centre environment. So in this clip, Stephen Bartlett is talking about when he was on a plane going over to the States, and there was a guy from Man versus, oh, there we go. You can control whether to share the audio and sharing the screen. Okay. So, oh no, because I'm not sharing the screen.
I can give you control.
I I don't know how to, but no, but it's you're controlling the slides, you see. So I don't think that would matter. But we can send you the clip. I'll carry on with the story. So he's on this flight and he's going over to the States and he's talking about his team at Social Chain, I think, in this context, and they have a group chat about man versus food and what your favorite sandwich is. I've never seen that show, but there must be this thing about what is your favorite sandwich. And on the flight, he's on the flight with this guy from Man versus Food, and he's texting his team before the flight takes off to say, oh my god, you're not going to believe who's on this flight. And he goes over to speak to the guy to ask him what his favorite sandwich is, so he can update his team, because it's this big team joke. And he goes and I think the guy's called Steve, and he says, Steve, and this guy, Steve, puts his hand up straight away and goes, not now, in that tone with the hand. And Stephen kind of retreats and thinks, oh, okay, clearly not a good time, not really going to be able to have, a bit of a joke with this guy. So goes back to his seat. And he then, looks at the group chat and they're all dying to know what this guy's favorite sandwich is. And he's like, oh yeah, couldn't really ask the question. It was just really awkward. He's obviously having a bad day or something. So then maybe a year or so later, he actually ends up having this guy on Diary of a CEO podcast and meets him and ends up having this sort of slightly awkward conversation with him. But I think what that Stephen's talking about in this clip is that you just never know who you're having that conversation with and where you're going to meet people again. And that was certainly something that I remember when I was at John Lewis around, making sure that you treat everybody as you would want to be treated. But also it's that, what are people going to say about you when they're not in the room? Because now Steve Bartlett, and all of his team have got a really bad impression of this guy, because that's not cool. Whereas he could have had some real fun with that, and then they would have all thought he was still a hero. So really, really just an interesting example to explain that concept. So it's just thinking about holding up that mirror to yourself in that professional environment and kind of doing a 360 and thinking, what are the angles that people are saying and what do you want them to see? And I think one thing that I definitely remember from my time at John Lewis was how people treated me when I was on my way up. So I joined on the graduate program a million years ago, and I progressed quite quickly because I was based in Newcastle and then got moved down to the head office quite quickly, and then got promoted quite a few times in succession. But when I was at Newcastle, there were a couple of managers that I still remember now, and this is like 25 years later, that I still remember now, who were really mean to me, like really mean to me. And I think looking back, they had a bit of a chip on their shoulder that I was the graduate, because that was a bit of a thing in John Lewis at the time. Yet when I then got promoted loads of times, I then became more senior than them. And when I was doing a branch visit, they'd be kissing up to me, right? But I knew that they hadn't liked me a couple of years before, or they treated me differently. So I think it's just another example of how you treat people. And I always try really hard to be super nice to people and understanding and listening to people, because you just never know where you're going to meet them again. And actually, we should all just be nice. Like, that shouldn't be so hard. So hopefully that example is useful just around thinking about that. And it's not overthinking it and being fake with people. It's just making sure that you are portraying yourself in a way that I guess you'd be proud of and you'd want to be portrayed. So let's move on and make this a bit more personal and think about how you are going to define your brand. So I've got a little exercise here, and I think I'm going to talk you through it rather than do it, because some of you might having your sandwich and can't be bothered to do an exercise, and some of you might not be interested. So it's one for you to come back to if it's of interest, and we'll make sure that you get these slides. So in this task is about working out what it is that you stand for, because I think when I think back to when I joined the John Lewis graduate scheme, did I know what I stood for? Probably not. And John Lewis is a business that is, very values led, was very about culture, especially then, maybe a bit less so now, but very much so then. So we had values and we had, competencies and behaviors and all these sorts of things. So I guess I just kind of got sucked into that. But actually, whilst your company will have some values, whether they're explicit or implicit, you will have your own personal values about what's important to you. And this is going to help you throughout your career to decide who you want to work for at various points in your life. So in this exercise, the way that it works is that you look at the values that are on the screen Most of them will make sense. Some of them you might just think, oh, they're a bit weird, but these are all values that could be your personal values. And the aim of the exercise is that you go through and you maybe have this on a printout or something, and you just highlight the ones that you think resonate with you. So some of them will resonate with most of us, I'm sure. So things like, I'm trying to think of a good one, friendships. Okay, so that's probably important for most people, I would have thought. So you would maybe highlight that one. And what tends to happen with this exercise is people will highlight loads of them. Okay, and then what I then do is I go back and I say, right, okay, let's get it down to 10, which can be quite hard when you look at how many are on there. So we'll have a bit of time getting it down to 10. We'll then go back and we'll try and get it down to 5. Now that's really hard to get it down to 5. But the point of this exercise is that if every value is a priority, then nothing is a priority. So actually you need to get the number down so that you can be super clear about what it is that you stand for. And that's how it works. And then you can use those to think about how you want to show up when you're at work, or whether it be online in a professional context. But they can act as a bit of a guide for you when you're decision making, when you're in positions where you can make decisions, because coming back to this will be super helpful in that sense. So I would do recommend that you spend a bit of time having a look at this exercise. It's quite fun to do, and it might change a little bit over your life, but most of them, if you're getting it down to 5, will probably be things that would be important to you for the rest of your life, I'm sure. So let's just move on to the next one. So I've kind of covered this a little bit, but it's the so what for that exercise. So as I said, useful to reflect on what's important to you. You know, these values are going to be acting as a bit of a guiding star for you when you're in the workplace, or either as a colleague or if you become a leader. So super useful, and you can see all of the context as to why and when that would be useful. So we've covered there just a little bit about how you want to show up, and that's okay, move on to the next one, that's fine. About how you want to show up and what you're going to stand for, and that's really important, just to work out kind of who you want to be in that work context, and start, you know, getting a bit more confidence around how you want to be perceived in the workplace. I want to just spend a little bit of time talking about networking now, because these topics that I'm covering, and I know there is a lot of content, they're just all relevant and they all interlink with each other, and they're all things that are going to be super important to help you hit the ground running and work out what you're standing for and progressing within your career. So I think networking is super useful, and it's something that I didn't do very much of in John Lewis in my early years. It was only when I became head of graduate recruitment that I actually sought out opportunities to do external networking. And I wish in hindsight that I'd done that earlier. Now that I've owned a few businesses, it comes a lot more naturally to me. There are more opportunities. I can definitely control my own diary a lot more now, so I can choose what it is that I want to go to. But I just want to touch on this because I think it's really important to always have some sort of a networking strategy and have this in mind throughout your career, because even if you did join somewhere like John Lewis or a big company and you think, I love this so much, I'm going to stay here forever. Now that doesn't happen so much these days, but it can still happen, and hopefully you will love your first job. But even within that, there will be internal networking that are going to help you raise your profile and get spotted for these opportunities. So I think it's really important to always be thinking about networking. So an example of where I did start to get networking when I was at John Lewis was I joined something called the Institute of Student Employers, which most graduate employers are members of. It still exists now. And I got to meet lots of other retail graduate employers at that. And combined with that, and also my presence on LinkedIn, because I've always been quite active on LinkedIn, I actually got headhunted for a role with Apple to head up their graduate recruitment. And it was when they were just starting to set up a graduate recruitment program. I was living in London at the time, but I had a fiance in Newcastle and was kind of coming up and down from Newcastle to London all the time. So for me, it wasn't the right time for me to go and take a job in New York, because I was thinking about getting married and having a baby and all those sorts of things. Maybe it's a bit of a regret because I got divorced. So maybe it's a regret and I should have taken the job in New York. But what I want to highlight with that is that I was out, getting stuck into networking at that point, both online and offline. And that then created an opportunity where I was offered an amazing role, and it would have been an amazing role where I'd have got to spend loads of time in New York, which is now my favorite place. So yeah, maybe it's a slight regret, but point being, there are opportunities to be had for sure. So in terms of strategies and platforms, you know, this could be a whole topic in itself. What I would recommend, I have a podcast that comes out every week called Beyond the Bio. And there are 2 really great episodes that you will be able to find. It's on every single platform. There's episode 2, which is around the benefits of networking and how to put a networking strategy together. And then there's a more recent episode that came out maybe two weeks ago. And they've both got the same guest in, which is a lady called Jenny Smith. And she is a networking guru. She's actually got a PhD in networking, and she's got this big business teaching people how to network. And she goes a lot deeper into the different levels of networking and, you know, different scenarios you might be in, and what to do if you feel uncomfortable and you're not used to networking, and how do you approach it, and where do you find events. And I would definitely recommend this. They're really short sessions. They're like maximum 20 minutes long, and they're really, really useful just to kind of get you thinking about networking in different ways. But some other little tips would be around being active on LinkedIn, following the right companies, because whenever they've got events, you will see those advertised. Also, Eventbrite, you can search by topic, you can search by location, so there's always cool stuff there. And it can be not just around sort of career development and promotions and new jobs, it can be around developing your knowledge in either something that you're interested in or something that's relevant to your career. So really useful to do that. And I think as well, useful to attend industry events, joining any professional associations that you get access to in your careers, and leveraging any existing connections as well. Really important that when you do start going networking, that you do have an up-to-date LinkedIn profile, and that when you do have conversations with people, you make sure that you connect with them in a timely fashion afterwards, so that you get that connection and you follow up on anything that you've agreed to do. So that leads us nicely on to think about how we are going to use social media in a professional environment. So I do feel it's important to have an online presence in a work setting. I think it's always a little bit weird if you can't find someone easily on the likes of LinkedIn. So I think that LinkedIn is the place to be. And if you haven't got a profile, then please, if you do one thing following this session, please do set up a profile. It's really, really helpful to have that. It's going to be like your online CV, but also the opportunities that you've got to either just comment on things or follow things, but also to put out your own content is super useful as well. So the other reasons why you want an online presence are going to be around that building your professional network. So you're going to find all sorts of different people within that. So, you know, if you're in an organization and you're applying for other jobs, you'd be able to find hiring managers or key people within those organizations, and you could follow them and see their content, see what's happening in their businesses. But as well, you can engage with connections and make sure that you are sharing that relevant content. So a few things that you might want to just think about in terms of online presence are, at the moment, you are probably on, I would guess, a few different platforms. So it might be that you might be on LinkedIn, you might be on, I don't know, Facebook's a bit out of date now, isn't it? But maybe Instagram, TikTok, things like that. And what I would suggest is, if you're going into professional mode, have a social media audit. So spend a couple of hours looking at your platforms and just thinking, what is visible? So if you are quite wild outside of work and you share that on your social media platforms, you might just want to change your privacy settings and make sure that it's only your friends and, you know, people that you trust that can see that. And I'll give you an example of where this backfired on someone. So I was on the employer forum board at Durham University. It was a while ago now, but I was on it for about 5 years. And it was when I was with John Lewis, and I was sat in a meeting, and there was a graduate recruitment manager from IBM who was sat at the table. And we started talking about whether you would search someone's social media if you were interviewing them. And this guy gave me an example of where he had a candidate that he was interviewing, and he had looked at her Facebook profile, which I thought was a bit weird. And actually, we had a conversation around the ethics of that. I would never have done that. One, I wouldn't have had time, but also I just thought it was super weird. He'd looked at this girl's Facebook, and it had an open profile with all her posts set to public. And she'd been talking about how she had an interview for Accenture and she really wanted to work for Accenture. And he's from IBM, and he sees this, and he actually brought it up with her in the interview. and sort of challenged her on it. And to her credit, apparently she handled it really well, and she was just super cool. And he loved her. He thought she was brilliant, and he offered her a job. What was really funny is she also got offered the job by Accenture, and obviously she went to Accenture because that was the job that she really wanted. But I just think it's worth being aware that some employers are a bit weird and have got too much time on their hand and might look at your social media. So just make sure that it's got tight privacy settings if the stuff that you wouldn't want them to see. And it might be the reverse of that. It might be that you're a super creative person, you want to get into a creative industry, and actually having your Pinterest or Instagram open actually will help you with your job search. So it's just doing what's appropriate for you and your situation. And also, when you do get into a serious job, there'll probably be social media policies. So you just want to tighten everything up, clear things out. You know, if there's any pictures on there that aren't great, you know, particularly think about profile pictures, which even if you tighten up your settings are probably still going to be visible. So is it an acceptable profile picture? Is it you sort of, you know, with a glass of wine looking a bit drunk? Would you want that as your profile picture if an employer might look for it? So just something to think about. So really important to just have that audit and think about the platforms that you want to be visible to an employer. Okay, let's just move on to the next one and have a little look at a few platforms. So I'm not going to talk about these in any real detail, but these are the ones that you would have seen my links to on that first intro page. So as I said before, I'm really into LinkedIn in particular. And I do think it's helpful to have a presence on things, because when someone Googles your name, your social media platforms are probably the first thing that are going to come up. So just a few things around some of these platforms. So LinkedIn is obviously the one that we're going to keep coming back to because it's so relevant to employers and to companies. It's people are really active on there. There has been a shift, I think, since LinkedIn first started, and I'm old enough to remember when it first came out. It used to be super professional. Now I think people talk a lot more about more personal things. You know, it's never going to be as conversational as any other platform, but you do see a bit more of that personality on there. So for me, as an example, I used to only ever post really, really professional things, whereas now I'm a lot more open and I share some of the things that have, you know, gone on in my personal life, not too personal, but, you know, things around my daughter and sort of learns from that. So you do see a bit more of that. It's a bit more conversational now. And I think once you start spending more time on the platform, you'll get a feel for what's appropriate. But I think LinkedIn is awesome for raising your profile for your career, because you can be perceived as a thought leader, as an expert in a particular subject, and the reach that you get on LinkedIn you will not get on any other platform. So you could do a great post, and it might even just be that you're looking for your next graduate role or your next career move, and you might want to post about that. And then say if I then liked it, then all of my network would see that I've liked and commented on it. So that organic reach that you're getting is really, really good. So it's a really important point to remember, to connect with people that are relevant, so that when you are putting stuff out there, it's then getting out to their networks as well. And you're going to get that on LinkedIn in a way that you just wouldn't anywhere else. So I think we are going to come back. No, we're not going to come back to LinkedIn, but I've given you quite a bit around LinkedIn there. So definitely have a go at LinkedIn, because I do think that is the way to go. But let's just super briefly touch on Twitter/X and Instagram as well. So Twitter is really good for certain sectors. So if you wanted to be in journalism, for example, like all the journalists are on Twitter, like that is their platform. And then Instagram could be great for creators, for fashion, for marketing. So you will know which platform is most relevant to your industry. And if you don't, maybe go and do a bit of research and work out which one it is. It's a great idea to think about, you know, who you admire in the industry that you want to go into, and start following those people, start looking at the kind of content that they put out, because that might give you some inspiration for your own content. So I think it's really important with any platform to be really consistent with it. So you're going to need to be consistent in a different way depending on which platform you choose. Now, because I've got a business that raises people's profiles, I've got this PR business, I need to be fairly visible on all of these platforms. But in theory, that could be a full-time job to post as much as the platforms tell you should be. So my advice to you would be to work out the one that's most relevant to your industry and spend your time on getting really good on that and thinking about how you represent yourself. Now, you might also want to think about having a professional profile on one of these platforms if you love it for personal use, but you don't want the employer to see that. people do that. Again, you just want to think about the balance of time. Have you got enough time to be being consistent on it if you create another profile? And again, that's the reason why you just want to try and focus on one. So it is being consistent. So the likes of Twitter, you'd be tweeting, or I don't know what they call it, Xing, I don't know, every day, because that's the kind of content that goes out on that. So it's regular content. With Instagram, people are more into stories at the moment. So for me personally on Instagram, I tend to do 2 grid posts. I do one on a Monday for my podcast, and then one at some point throughout the rest of the week, depending on what I've got event-wise going on. But what I do a lot of on Instagram is stories, which seems to have a lot of engagement on that at the moment. So again, see what's happening in your industry. And then LinkedIn, I think you can actually be the laziest in some ways on LinkedIn in terms of posting content. So some people will tell you to post every day, but actually you could post once a week, and that would be enough on LinkedIn to just kind of keep growing your audience. One top tip that I would give you for LinkedIn, if you decide to go all in on that, is to turn your profile onto creator mode if you haven't got that on already. So you'll find that within the resources in the settings, and by doing that it will mean that people can follow you rather than have to request to connect to you. And it's just a really quick, easy way that requires no effort to grow your audience. So that would be my top tip around LinkedIn. So what I would suggest is that you do spend a bit of time on the social side of things, because I think that it's going to be really useful for you as you progress in your careers to have that consistent presence and think about what it is that you want to share messaging wise, to connect with those future employers, to follow the companies that you're interested in, to see what trends are happening, and to be inspired, because there's some really good stuff on there. But you have to be, I keep saying it, but you've got to be consistent. And that's not just around posting content, but it's around interacting with other people as well. So it's making valuable comments. Something that I've seen a lot of on LinkedIn in particular at the moment is people using AI to either write their posts or write their comments. I would suggest maybe not doing that. Definitely not for the comments, because it's super weird and really obvious. For your post, you might want to try it just to maybe get a bit of inspiration around what to post, but you would need to tweak it so that it does sound like you, because it can appear a bit robotic. But yeah, definitely spend a bit of time on that. So I think I've got 1 or 2 more slides. So I just want to point out a couple of resources for you. So I've got a couple of books out. So I've got From Learner to Earner, which helps students and graduates get through the assessment process and secure that first job. It's also got 18 resources around CVs and career planning and stuff. But I am going to make those resources available to you guys. I'll make sure that you get the link sent out and give you access to all the resources within that. And then also I've got the Ambition Accelerator, which is lots of stories around progressing your career, whether that be a corporate route or even having your own business at some point. So 2 useful resources, but do check out the podcast as well, because there's some really good stuff there that would really help you with raising your profile. So you'll be able to tell from the titles of the episodes which ones are relevant, but I would definitely have a look at the networking ones, because there's some really good stuff there for people at whatever stage of their career that they're at. So I think that probably brings me to the end of the content that I've got, but hopefully that is a whistle-stop tour of lots of different things that you could be thinking about around how you're going to come across and how you're going to grow your profile and your presence within the working industry. But I'm happy to take any questions that anyone might have.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Sophie, for that. If anyone has any questions, just pop it into the chat now, and we can go through.
Don't be shy.
I think George actually has got his hand up. Did you want to state your question?
Hello. Yes, I am. Thank you so much for giving me the time. So I am an advertising, PR, media, and branding student, and my design skills are not that good. So I'm thinking maybe to go more towards the PR side of things. But and I've always struggled with thinking about what to post and how to craft my image. Part of it was because I didn't know exactly what to post, but also part of it is because I do hold some opinions. I'm not precious about my ideas, but how do I make sure that whatever I post is palatable to a wide audience and they don't get turned off by my opinions, because I might hold something very near and dear to my heart, but it might sound different to different employers.
Okay.
And if I go to work for them, what they're going to think of me and how do I curate image? Thank you so
That
much.
is a great question. That is such a great question. And there would be some people out there that would tell you that actually it's really powerful to have very strong opinions because it's going to provoke a reaction. So some people will say that that's brilliant. What I would say is if there's anything that you were worried might offend people, that you know, I'm trying to think of an example, but say something super racist, which I'm sure you wouldn't say, but that's clearly something that we would all agree, I'm sure, would be inappropriate. So I think if it's more around your opinion on something where, you know, everyone would just have different opinions and they might disagree with you, but they wouldn't be offended by what you say, I think that's okay. And I think there's got to be a point where you just try things out. And maybe you ask yourself that question before you do it. You know, if my dream employer saw this, what are they going to think? And maybe ask yourself that question before you post it. And I think the other thing would be maybe think about whether you could get a mentor within the industry or even a friend that's maybe a few years ahead of you in the industry. And actually, could you sense check your post with them before you post it and just have a, and maybe it's reciprocal and they do the same, you know, with you. And that might just help you. And I think it's just getting the confidence to do that. But give it a go because it's worse to do nothing, right?
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, I'm just starting out, so I really want to make sure that I create my image right from the beginning. Yeah.
Well, find some great people to follow and get inspired by their content as well. Cool. Thank you. Great question.
Thank you.
So I can see a couple of questions in the chat. So the podcast is called Beyond the Bio. I'll just type it in, and you want the ones that are about networking. There's 2 episodes about networking. Some of the other ones I think, oh, sorry, it's my phone, might be relevant as well, but the networking ones will definitely be relevant. There's another question there. What kind of stories on Instagram have got the best engagement in your experience? Well, see, I'm older than you guys, so probably the stuff that I post on Instagram stories is probably not as cool as what you would post. But the way I use it, because mine is a work Instagram, I would say, I keep my grid as fairly professional. So like I say, one post about the podcast, one I might be at an event or something worky. And then my stories tend to be a bit more fun. So, you know, I've got a story from the gym this morning where I was just messing around with some weights and stuff. So there's a story about that. It might be, you know, I'm out for dinner with some friends, you know, a food picture or whatever, or, you know, we're out for drinks or something. So I tend to mix it up. One thing that I do put on, which does very well on stories, is I do a little overview of what's in my diary for the week, and I post that on a Monday morning. And that usually gets quite a lot of comments or engagement through that. Other things are if people that have a little bit well known or, you know, within the industry tag me and stuff. So I'm quite friendly with Sarah Davies, who's one of the dragons on Dragon's Den. And she did a post about me at the weekend, actually, on Instagram. On LinkedIn, and you'll see it if you connect with me on LinkedIn. And I'd done a bit of a repost in my stories, and that got loads of engagement because people know who she is in my world and they really like her. So again, it's that whole trying it out thing. But I think you can definitely be more lighthearted in the stories than on the grid if you're thinking about it from a professional perspective.
Amazing, Sophie. Thank you so much. I'm not sure if anyone else has any other questions before we head off. Oh, we do. Christina. Go for it, Sophie.
So let me just read them. What will be your advice for a graduate with a business marketing degree for the following few months before graduation? What would you recommend engaging in to elevate your personal brand before going into a graduate program? LinkedIn. It's got to be LinkedIn. And I think if you can, I'd probably try and do some networking as well and maybe get yourself along to events. I'm always really impressed when I meet people that are just starting out in their careers at events that just want to learn from other people. And I think you've got to be, you'll struggle if you try and approach people that are quite advanced in their career and ask them for a coffee because they're going to be super busy. And even though that would be awesome for you, they will be a bit busy. But I think if you go to events and maybe look for people that are a few years into their career rather than at the tops of their career, then they're going to have the time and also be a bit closer to kind of your next steps and the roles that you want to be aiming for. So I would try and get to some events and try and meet people that are just, you know, a few steps ahead of you. And I think as well, I would be getting into LinkedIn. I'd be on LinkedIn. I'd be following either the company that you're going to work for or companies that you want to work for, companies that are relevant in the space, any key individuals that are well known in that space. If you know whether you've got a job already or whether you know what you want to go into, who are the people that have got things to say, who are the top voices, as LinkedIn would call them, that you need to be following, because I think the insight that they will share will direct you to other things that you're going to find useful.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Sophie. Yeah, it looks like everyone's learned a lot. I'm certainly going to be listening to that podcast.
Oh, so there's just one final question there, I think. So what events
specifically would you recommend?
Would you recommend attending? Gosh, what would I recommend? I think I would go, if I were you, I'd go on to Eventbrite and I'd maybe put in marketing or management and the location that you're in. Flora, I'm guessing you're female, so you might want to look at maybe women in business events, because that might actually be a really cool, friendly, welcoming space. That, you know, when I first started going to external networking events was when I first set up my first business, and I was back in Newcastle. Newcastle, I think it's a bit better now, but I think it was very traditional on the business scene, and I felt really overwhelmed by some of the networking events that were here. And then I found a women in business one, and that really worked for me because it felt more relaxed and it was a different vibe. So it might be worth looking at, you know, specific women events, or, you know, there's the really niche events now. You know, I was talking to Jenny on that episode I was talking about recently around networking goals, and she was talking about, you know, micro niches that are specific communities. And, you know, you'll see lots of groups for things like people in business with ADHD, like that's pretty niche, but awesome to be able to go into that community if that's something that, you know, is relevant to you. So yeah, go on Eventbrite, have a play around, play by location, and play around with the topics as well. Okay, so there's another question there about, if you want to network with the most advanced business CEOs and owners, how would I get their attention? I think this is quite hard now because, you know, me as an example, I get requests every single week to meet people for a coffee, and I would love to say yes to them because I got lots of help in my career. But the reality is, I would be doing them all the time if I said yes to everything. So it's really, really hard. I think if you want to get people that are really senior, I think sometimes there's an element of luck that you just catch them at the right time and they say yes. But maybe you could, you know, what could you offer them? Is there something that you could help them with so that there's a win for them as well? So you might need to be creative with that. Or it might be that you get in touch with them or their PA or whoever and ask if they could recommend somebody else in their team that might be able to support you. So that might be another way. Otherwise, I think it's probably finding their content and learning from them in a different way. So it might be, again, going back to a networking event that they're keynoting at, that they're speaking at, where you can hear them speak and you can grab them and ask them a question afterwards. It might be putting their name into whichever podcast platform you use and seeing what content comes up and listening to them speak on that. So I think there's a few different ways, but I think the reality of getting a one-to-one with someone that's really senior, I think is probably quite slim. So I think it's just being realistic with that. Okay, there's another question there. Going to finish my graduate program in food and science and biotechnology in a few months. Currently looking to getting certifications on quality assurance, quality control. Awesome. Do you think this will give me an edge over other applicants in the job market? Yes, I think so, because what you'll find with any graduate has basically got a degree, right? You've all got degrees. So in some ways, you don't then stand out just for having a degree, because you need that as an entry requirement for a program. So if you can do other things that are going to make you stand out, so whether that be in this situation certifications, or whether that be attending specific events or creating content online or getting some work experience somewhere, that is all going to be useful, because it's something that you're going to be able to talk about in an interview that adds a bit of difference. And I would totally recommend doing all of that. You've got to always think about how you're going to stand out above everybody else, because everyone that gets to an interview for a graduate job has probably got a similar level of qualifications, because you have to have that to get to that point. So what can you do that's a bit different outside of that you can talk about confidently at interview? Okay. What are you looking into when you're considering a graduate for a junior position who has no experience in that sector, but it's coming from a different industry? Is there a specific thing that recruiters are looking at, like a certificate or a course? Yeah, I've covered that a little bit around the course. I think what I would add to that, though, a different dynamic on that question is if you're coming from a different industry or you haven't got experience, sometimes that doesn't matter. It depends what it is. Like if you're applying to be a doctor, you need some experience and you need to be qualified for that, right? But say in business, for example, that you don't have to necessarily have had business experience. So say if I was hiring someone for an entry-level role, and it was the same when I was at John Lewis, I would go for enthusiasm all day long for a grad role, because you can't teach enthusiasm, you can't create it, it's either there or it's not. So what I would be saying is only apply for jobs that you can get so blooming excited about it in an interview that it's infectious. Because if I'm talking about something and I'm really excited, you can see that I'm more animated and I'm more interested in it, and it will, you know, just by me smiling and being excited about something, it's going to build a rapport with whoever's interviewing me, and they're going to root for me and they're going to want to give me the job. You know, I've hired people in the past in every role and every business that I've been in who didn't tick all of the boxes to do the job, but it didn't matter because I knew that they were so enthusiastic that they would learn. So my advice on that would be only ever apply for jobs and companies, and it's really important that you get the two. It's not just the job and it's not just the company, it's both. Only apply for the ones that you can get super excited about, because that will come across, and that is relevant for most of your industries unless you've got to have a particular background. Awesome. Well, I look forward to all your connections over on LinkedIn.
Thank you so much, Sophie. I really appreciate all the advice there. As I mentioned, it's all recorded, so if you do want to watch it back, you're more than welcome to. I will send you all the link in an email after this, along with all of the links for Sophie's resources and social media and everything as well. So yeah, thank you so much, Sophie, and thank you everyone for joining us today as well. All right. Have a lovely day.